Omagyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshunlitanjena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Dandavat pranams, all the assembled Vaishnavas, Kirtida Didi Dandavat. And we've had a few others also coming in, Tungarasa also. Welcome everyone. Well, today is a very special day. Hang on, I'm getting an echo in the room up here. We have someone in the loft. Today's a very special day. It is the divine appearance day of Srila Jiva Goswami Prabhu. And of course, Vamanadeva, Avirbhav, Vamana Dwadashi. It's interesting because the rules of Ekadashi, they're considered so important that they override the rules for observing. Oh, hang on. Okay, yeah, we're already recording. The rules for Ekadashi are considered so important that they override the rules for observing Vishnu Tattva, Avatar, Avirbhav, right? The appearance, because normally on the appearance day of Vishnu Tattva avatars, then we fast, right, until the time of their appearance, whether that's noon or whether it's twilight or whether it's midnight in the case of Krishna. But it's also given in the writings of our acharyas that it's more important to observe the fast, the paran time, right? The break fast time for Ekadashi, the next day, Dwadashi, right? And so if there's a Vishnu Tattva Avirbhav appearance day on Dwadashi, the day after Ekadashi, you don't fast, you actually break your fast. And then you may continue fasting, but you have to it's so considered so important that you break your fast from Ekadashi the next day. And so it's an interesting point. And in the Mat, we would break our fast, and instead of fasting as we normally would in the morning for the appearance day. So today's Dwadashi. So we broke our fast from Ekadashi yesterday, and we're honoring Vamanadeva. Vamanadeva is the dwarf avatar, right? And normally when you don't think of a dwarf as necessarily being especially beautiful, right? But the Lord beautifies everything that he touches. And so in his form as the dwarf avatar Vamanadeva, he's inconceivably charming and beautiful. And it's mentioned that he's, there's no like disjointedness or incongruence in his form. There's no awkwardness, like his head's too big or limbs too short or anything. But all the proportions of his body are perfect and harmonious and very beautiful and very charming. And it's also very wonderful to conceive that the Lord chooses to appear, right, in so many different forms, different species of life, right? He appears in the fish species, he appears in the, half lion species, right? In so many different, even so far as a boar, right? A pig form, he goes so far as that. And then he also appears as a dwarf in the form of Vamanadeva. And the pastime of Vamanadeva is very, very wonderful, right? So his principal devotee in that lila is Bali Maharaj, right? And that's another interesting point because Bali Maharaj's grandfather is Prahlad Maharaj, right? And Srila Maharaj makes the point how Prahlad is a great devotee, but then Prahlad's son is somewhat demonic. But then his son, so Prahlad's grandson, is Bali Maharaj, who also is a great devotee. And so it's demonstrated, right, that the blood connection ultimately doesn't mean anything, but the spiritual current is independent of blood ties. And we're also reminded of Srila Maharaj's expression, the zigzag line of the truth. The zigzag line of the truth. The spiritual current, we don't know where it's going to appear, right? it has its Krishna is independent, right? He moves in according to his own will, right? There's a line, perhaps a Rupa Goswami, Suvasni Didi can probably tell us, that Srila Jiva Maharaj quotes describing the movement of the snake, right? You moving in a crooked, twisted way. You don't know which way it's going to go, right? And so Krishna's movement is independent, not bound by conventional laws, right? So we have to develop our own inner eye to be able to recognize where the spiritual current is appearing, right? There's one beautiful expression of Srila Govinda Maharaj that I remember fairly often, where he says, he's speaking in a little bit of a different context, but he says, we did not come for any mundane purpose, right? And so he says, wherever we see the light of divinity, we must bow our head there, right? Wherever it may appear, we should be able to recognize and give our reverence there, not bound, not restricted by any mundane prejudice, right? We may have some prejudice against some person for some material reason. They look a certain way, or they're a certain age, or a certain gender, or a certain race, or they have certain habits. We may have some prejudice, right, like that. But we should overlook those things, right? And be able to recognize, oh, the light of divinity is shining here, right? There is some spiritual current flowing here, and I must bow my head here, and we will be tested like that. And Bali Maharaj, who we're also honoring today, he's actually a very good example of this, because he actually had to go to the point of rejecting his own guru, right? There's a famous verse in Srimad Bhagavatam that's quoted sometimes by our gurus. Gurur na sasyat, swajano na sasyat, pita na sasyat, janini na sasyat, daivam na mochiyad mrityun samupeta mrityam. Got a few words wrong there. My apologies, Suvasini. But there's a famous verse in Bhagavatam, I believe, coming from Rishabdev, great devotee, saying that if someone cannot liberate us from the cycle of birth and death, they are not our true well-wisher, right? And it specifies that guru is not a real guru. That father is not a real father. That mother is not a real mother. That friend is not a real friend, right? And so on and so forth. If they cannot connect us with our real purpose in life, they are not fit to be called by their title. And so it even mentions there, if one's own teacher has deviated from the path of truth, we must be ready to give them up, right? And so Bali Maharaj is an example of that, right? Because Bali Maharaj, his own guru, right, Shukracharya, family guru, the Indian traditional system is a little different from, how we conceive of guru. But, his guru is Shukracharya, Bali Maharaj. And so we hear Vamanadeva, right? He comes to trick Bali Maharaj out of his proprietorship of the three worlds, right? The upper, middle, lower, because, throughout the ages, we hear of this ongoing battle between the devas and the asuras, the gods and the demons. And sometimes the demons are successful and they're able to take control of all the planetary systems for some time, right? Of course, in this age of Kali, it is different. We hear that kind of line of communication, it's closed, it's sealed in this age. But in previous ages and other ages, it's very common that the devas, the gods, will come from upper planets and visit this plane, and the demonic beings from lower planets, there's a whole exchange, going on. But anyhow, so there's this ongoing battle, right, for supremacy and control over the universe. And so we hear that Bali Marsh, he's a devotee, but he's a member of the Asura race, this demonic race. And so he and his tribe, they've taken control. And the devas, the gods, they are, they're very disturbed. They've lost their homes and jobs, you know. And so they pray to Vishnu, please help us, please help us get our planet back. We've lost our place. And so Vishnu appears, so Vishnu devises, he's very original. Like we got to acknowledge that. The Lord is very original in how he does things, right? One of the best like gimmicks you could say that he pulls is the Mohini Morti, right? When they have to trick the demons out of the pot of nectar of immortality that they've stolen. And Vishnu, in order to do so, Vishnu could just go and take it, right? But that would be boring. So he chooses to appear in this unique Mohini Morti form. Very charming, beautiful woman, who bewilders the mind of any man that she meets, right? So that's how Vishnu tricks them. And there's a very elaborate description in Bhagavatam how she's dressed and her clothes are waving in the wind and she has this ball that she's bouncing. So in the form of Mohini Morti, this charming young woman, Vishnu tricks the demons out of this pot of immortality. So anyhow, and in this case with Bali Maharaj, he chooses to appear. So he's tasked with this mission to take the control away from the demons. And so again, he could just take it, but that would be boring. And so he chooses to appear as a dwarf. And he's born to Devahuti, right? Who's the mother of the Devas. Welcome, Ramananda Prabhu, Ananta Shesh, Jagannath Priya, Suvasini Didi. Great to be here with all of you. So he's born, as a deva, as a dwarf, in the form of a dwarf, and this is his mission, right? To trick the Bali Marsh out of his ownership. And so we hear, right, Bali Marsh, he's in the middle of some important fire sacrifice, yagya, and there's a whole setup, right? And he's got his entourage, his family guru Shukracharya is there, and they've got this elaborate fire sacrifice that they're carrying on with. And so then what happens is Vamanadeva, this very charming, beautiful young dwarf boy, he appears on the scene, and he's also a Brahmin, right? And it's traditional that the the other social orders, and especially the Kshatriyas, who are the ruling and warrior class, it's traditional, the custom, that they will support the Brahmins, right, who are the scholar, sage class, right? And so it's normal. The Brahmins, they're actually poor, but they will ask for alms, they'll ask for support from the Kshatriya class. This is very normal in the Vedic society. And so Vamanadev goes, and he, as Bali Maharaj is carrying on with this fire sacrifice, and perhaps someone here may be able to give more detail. I think there is a particular point in the sacrifice where you're meant to give gifts and charity. I think there is something like that too. And so Vamanadev appears on the scene, and he requests Bali Maharaj for some charity. And Bali Maharaj is happy, yes, whatever I can give you, you please tell me. And and Vamanadev is very tricky, right? And he says very, humbly, oh, all I need is 3 steps of land, just 3 paces of land. And And Bali Maharaj tells him, oh, that's so little. You can ask for anything, whatever you want. Jai Suvasini Devi. You can ask for anything. I can give you a whole, world, a whole planet to yourself, something like that, like ask for something more. Only 3 paces of land, that's nothing. You don't understand, how much I have. And then there's actually a very nice section there where Vamanadeva responds and speaking on the value of, just asking for what you need, right? And taking what you need, not more than that, and if we are too greedy in what we acquire, we'll ultimately be ruined by that. There's a very nice section where he speaks on that point, right? Of not accepting more than just what you need, right? Not more, not less than that. Do you want to say something, Suhasini?
No, you carry on. That's nice. I'm
Okay,
just
okay,
hearing.
we'll ask you
Clearly.
to say something later. So Bali, so Vamanadeva insists, no, all I need is 3 steps of land. Meanwhile, right, this Shukracharya, who's the so-called guru, but actually quite materialistic, he understands that this is a trick, right? And then he tries to warn Bali Maharaj and tell him, this isn't what it seems, you're being duped. But now this is the interesting point, right? Bali Maharaj, he's being instructed by his guru, right, to break this promise he's just made to this young, apparently simple Brahmin boy. But Bali Maharaj, he's actually a very righteous person. He's actually of a very devotional nature and very dharmic also. And so Bali Maharaj, he says, even if this is a trick, even if this is actually Lord Vishnu coming to trick me out of all my property, he says, so be it, but I can't break my promise. Oh, Ganga Lila's here, Dandavat, welcome. And we had a few others come in the room as well, Ramananda Prabhu, and there were some other names as well. Sadhvi has come, Dulal Prabhu has come, and there was another named Pawan. He left. Okay. Okay, bye, Pawan. Gangali is getting a tooth pulled right now. Oh dear. Wow, you're tuning in from the dentist chair. Wow, 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 wow. That's a new one.
Seriously, like I'm not making this up. I'm numbed right now.
Oh my goodness. Look at that. Okay.
You
This
can,
is a new record now. We've got someone I've had lots tuning in from cars and tuning in from work. Haven't had
yeah,
anyone tune in from the
dentist
dentist.
chair. Uh,
Oh dear
they're
me.
gonna pull out a wisdom tooth, so I'm terrified. So
Oh dear. That's
you're my anchor. You're my anchor.
oh. Well, our hearts are with you and hopefully thinking about the wonderful pastime of Vamanadeva and Bali Marsh will help. So this is like a crucial moment in the life of Bali Maharaj where he actually has to reject his own teacher because he recognizes that his own teacher has deviated from the truth. And so Bali Maharaj understands what is the correct path of Dharma and he sticks to that. And so he asserts, no, even if I am being duped, I have to keep my promise. I have that duty, to keep my promise to the Brahmin. And so he confirms that. And there's one funny moment we hear, because in these fire sacrifices, there are all kinds of little rituals, right? And not only fire sacrifices, I mean in general in the Vedic world of different practices. And there's some there's a it's called a sankalpa, I think, isn't it, Suvasini Didi? And you take the
Yeah.
water pot, right?
Yeah, sankalpa. Yeah, pour the water from this water pot. Yeah, and make that vow. Yeah, I'm promised that I'm giving this. Like,
Mm,
yeah, sankalpa.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like an affirmation, right? Of that, I'm going to do this, I'm making this vow, this promise. And so Bali Maharaj says that he's going to give this gift to Vamanadeva, and then he's going to make the sankalpa, and he has this little water pot. But there's a description. I'm not sure if it's directly in Bhagavatam, but it's written in one place, and we've heard from our Gurudev that as Bali Maharaj is lifting up this pot of water to make his sankalpa, then his guru Shukracharya, he has all these mystic powers. Then he assumes this very tiny form, and he climbs up the spout of this water pot, like to try and block it, like to interrupt this whole process, because Shukracharya is worried about himself. He's got a nice cushy position, as the advisor and family guru of the king of all these planets. He's afraid of losing that. So he climbs up this spout in this very tiny form, and he's like blocking it up. And Bali Maharaj, there's like a moment of real comedy. Bali Maharaj is trying to pour the water out. And then Vamanadev, he takes a blade of kusha grass, right? This special sacred grass that's used in ceremonies. And he pokes it up the spout, like to try and clear it of whatever's there. And I think he poked one of Shukracharya's eyes, right? Something like that, And in that way he unblocked the water spout. The sankalpa was successfully made. And then Vamanadev starts to show his true colors, reveals his true purpose, and he starts expanding, right, into this, massive, gigantic form, and huge form that's spanning, all the planetary systems, and he takes one step, he covers, half of all. So we're talking about these like 14 planetary systems that are within each Brahmanda, universal system. And with one step, he covers half. And with his second step, he covers the other half. So in 2 steps, he covers all the planetary systems within the Brahmanda. And we also hear that his big toe poked a hole through the covering of the universe. And it is from that, his toe poked into the waters of the causal ocean, where we, at the top of outside of our universal system. And so in those causal waters where Mahavishnu is resting, right? We see those paintings, and so the water came in, and that's actually where the Ganges water is coming from. Its origin is from that causal ocean. And due to Vamanadev poking his toe through the covering of the universe. And so then Vamanadev, he turns to Bali Maharaj, and he tells him, you promised me 3 steps of land, but I've just covered everything in 2 steps, so now what are you going to do? Now what are you going to do? And then there's this very beautiful moment of surrender when Bali Maharaj, he bows his head to the Lord, and he says, oh my Lord, you can place your 3rd step on my head. You can place your 3rd step on my head. And it's a very profound thought, because we can conceive, right, that from this we can come to this conclusion, right? It's one level of surrender to offer your possessions, right? To offer everything that you have, but then to offer yourself, that is something deeper, right? And that is something more valuable, more precious. And so Bali Maharaj is a very beautiful example of that, right? That he offered everything that he had in possession, but then ultimately he offered his own self, right? So it's a very, very beautiful, very charming and instructive pastime also. That is, what we are trying to do, right, with our lives. We want to offer our very self, and in everything that we do offer, our meditation is actually that I'm offering myself through this, right, through this instrument, right? When we're doing puja, right, or making offerings to the Lord, we're not just, offering an incense stick, but we're trying to offer ourselves through that, right? That's really the idea in the devotional line. So we are remembering this pastime on this day. And then Jiva Goswami, right? It is also the appearance day of Jiva Goswami. And Jiva Goswami, he is, for those who don't know him, he is one of the 6 Goswamis, right? I think everyone here has heard of the 6 Goswamis, these famous scholar saints who lived some in the time of Mahaprabhu, some a little bit after, but within that era of Mahaprabhu's pastimes in this world. And they lived in Vrindavan, and primarily they're famous for being our Shastra gurus, right? Particularly Rup and Sanatan, Jiva Goswami. They're known as being our Shastra gurus, means that they are our gurus who put Mahaprabhu's message in the form of scripture, in the form of books, the written form, which, it's a very unique, it's a contribution of unique importance, right? Preaching as we try to do, that has its importance, right? But actually putting the message down in written form, that is of particular import. That is of a different, unique type of importance, right? Because what are you doing? You're creating a clear record and a clear reference for persons now and in the future to be able to refer to and have clear understanding of what these teachings are, right? Establishing what the teachings are and having a clear record of that for future generations. And so these are our Shastra gurus. And they were personally empowered. Rup and Sanatan, they were the head of these 6 Goswamis. They were personally empowered, directly empowered by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, right? And this is recorded in Chaitanya Charitamrita, right? Mahaprabhu instructing them. Sanatan for 2 months, Jiva Goswami for around 10 days at different times. And then they received that instruction and later went on to compose numerous books, right, elaborating on the knowledge they had received from Mahaprabhu. And so so Rup and Sanatan are brothers, right? And then it was their nephew, Jiva Goswami was their nephew, and it's his appearance day that we are honoring today. And he actually did even more extensive work in the written form, right? He's very highly philosophical, right? To the point where his writings are not as accessible as those of Rup and Sanatan. Jiva Goswami really gets down, into the nitty-gritty of the details of the Gaudiya Vaishnava theology, right? Heavy going, right? In other words, I haven't actually been through. I've perhaps glanced through some of his texts, but yeah, it's heavy going, highly philosophical. Bhaktivinoda Thakur described Jiva Goswami as the greatest philosopher ever known to mankind. And that was his comment about Jiva Goswami. And he wrote about 500,000 verses. It was like just under 500,000 Sanskrit verses that Jiva Goswami wrote, elaborating on the teachings of Mahaprabhu and with extensive citation from previous Vedic texts, right? Supporting, backing up Mahaprabhu's message. So, and Jiva Goswami, like he wasn't writing for us, he was writing for, hello, Jagannath Priya. Jiva Goswami, he was writing for like the serious scholar section, for people who need, this type of approach, right? And this type of evidence, right, for the teachings. He also gave this grammatical, what is it, Vyakaran? I forget the name. Savasniji could say it.
Harinama Vyakaran. Harinam.
It's Harinama Vyakaran. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a book on Sanskrit grammar, right? But he actually introduced. He did it in a very nice way, in that he uses the names of the Lord, right, in his explanation of the grammar. And our Gurudev mentioned that made it a lot sweeter than it normally would be, studying Sanskrit grammar. Gurudev, he said something like, you're in the desert and then there's a wonderful oasis there, like this very dry Sanskrit grammar, but then using the names of the Lord, that made it more sweet, But
actually, it's Harinamamrita Vyakaran.
Yeah, I was thinking there was another word in there. That's it. Yeah, Harinamamrita Vyakaram.
Yes.
That's it. Harinam. Thank you, Didi. Harinamamrita Vyakaram. That's it. And so Jiva Goswami, he actually has this, as I said, right, he was especially writing for the pundit section, right, the scholar section. And in that regard, he also had this role as like a kind of protector, a fighter also. There's an element of a fighter, and that he's protecting the pure message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, like protecting it from outside influence of all types of misunderstanding and misconception, right? Like very clearly laying down. And he prepared for that. He actually spent a few years in his youth in Varanasi, right? Varanasi is more or less the capital of Mayavad in India. Impersonal conception of the Lord, very prevalent in Varanasi. And Jiva Goswami spent a few years there studying. It's also like a center of learning in India to this day. So Jiva Goswami, like, he knew he had this important work to carry out, the presenting all these explanations. And so he lived in Varanasi for a few years studying. And he wasn't just studying the scriptures on pure devotion. He was studying everything. He was studying everything that was against the message of Mahaprabhu. He was like a good lawyer. Like when you're going to face your opponent in court, first you need to have a good understanding of what the argument of your opponent. So he was like that. And he even studied texts which we are explicitly warned not to read. There's one text from Shankaracharya, right, who's I don't know if he's the original propounder of Mayavad, but definitely the most influential in personal conception. But there's one commentary he wrote, Shariraka Bhashya, it's called, and it's explicitly stated in Chaitanya Charitamrita, don't read this. If you read it, you'll be destroyed, you'll be ruined, right? Because it disturbs your faith, hearing all these things, against, your own belief, your own conception. It will, disturb your faith and ruin your consciousness. And so it's warned, like, don't read this book. Jiva Goswami studied that book very seriously, this is like his very special role in the world of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, Gaudiya Siddhanta. So, yeah. And there's one verse I wanted to share, but maybe first, there's one very very charming story, which illustrates Jiva Goswami's moods. Some of you know that story already, but we can remember it today. Just illustrating this spirit of protection, that Jiva Goswami had. So he was living in Vrindavan, right? And he's the nephew of Rupa and Sanatan. And so he's a lot younger than them, studying under them, serving them. And he was particularly serving under Rupa Goswami. He took the special shelter of Rupa Goswami. And so we hear of this one occasion. There was one Digvijay Pandit, right? Digvijay Pandit. This is a tradition in India. India has a whole tradition of debate, like honorable scholarly debate. And so there was a whole tradition of scholars traveling across India, meeting with other scholars, challenging each other. And and whoever would win the debate, they would take some favor or something from their defeated opponent, and they would also earn titles for themselves in that way. And so if you were able to conquer, a certain number of scholars in so many different regions, then you would earn this title, Digvijaya Pandit, which literally means scholar who conquers in all directions. And so there was one scholar like that who he was traveling through India, and he came to Vrindavan. There's Ash. He came to Vrindavan, and he heard, and they're like actually searching out where are all the big scholars, that I can fight with. And so he heard about this Rupa and Sanatan, and thinking, oh, if I can defeat them, I'll earn more recognition for myself. And so he goes to Sanatan Goswami. Sanatan's the eldest, right? The most senior. And he challenges him. But the mood of Rup and Sanatan is very, very humble, right? We see this consistently in all the descriptions that we hear about them. They're extreme, like humble to the point of it being painful to hear sometimes. And Sanatan Goswami, he doesn't feel any need to prove himself, and he's also busy with other things. He's working on very important books, like Brihad Bhagavatamrita and Hari Bhakti Vilas and so on. And so Sanatan Goswami, he tells him, oh, I'm a little busy, I'm sorry. I just don't have the time, And that scholar, I mean, what a rascal he is, and he tells Sanatan, well, in that case, will you sign this paper to say that you've been defeated by me? And again, Sanatan Goswami, he's the emblem of humility. And he says, yes, no problem. And so he signs the paper admitting defeat to this scholar. And then, this is such a deep point to contemplate, right? He doesn't feel any need to prove himself to this foolish man, right? And he doesn't care about how he may be represented in the world. He just wants to continue with the authentic work that he's going on with, right? And it's like, oh, this person, wants wants recognition from me, I'll give them recognition. I don't care. It's just superficial, right? So I find it a very helpful pastime to remember, right? Because if we think in our own daily lives, how many times our ego can get ruffled by moments like this, right? And somebody misunderstands us or is, taking advantage of us in some way. Like, who cares? Just let them play their game. It doesn't matter. Who cares? It's all superficial anyway. We've got our own current going on, right? Like, who cares? And so Sanatan, he says, yes, no problem. He signs the paper. Then that Pandit, he goes to Rupa Goswami and he tells him, oh, I just defeated your guru, right? Sanatan in debate. And so what about you? You know, are you going to debate with me? And Rupa Goswami takes the same policy. Oh, I'm very sorry. I'm a little busy right now. I don't have time. And yes, sure, I'll sign the paper. No problem. You know, you can publish it in the newspaper. You defeated me. You know, have fun. Just let me carry on in peace, right? Let me carry on with my work in peace, right? Because this is the thing, right? If we can you know, if we can manage to not fight with the environment, then we actually maintain peace around ourselves, right? And our Gurudev used to say, if somebody wants honor from us, just give them honor. You know, what's the problem? We can go on with a peaceful life, you know. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj, in one place, he says, if somebody wants honor from us and we don't give it to them, he said they will be like a ghost haunting after us, right? And I'm sure you've all had experiences like that. You know, someone wants us to give them respect, we don't give it. And then, you know, that sticks on them, you know, that bothers them. And then they're like hounding you in some subtle or not so subtle way, you know, because they want that certificate, right? They want to feel like they got that respect from you, right? So why waste your time with that whole game? Just give it to them and be done with it and be free, be peaceful, right? So this is Sanatana Goswami's policy, and he signs the paper, and that scholar is very happy. And but then he hears from someone else that they have a nephew, and then their nephew is even more brilliant than them. And if he can't defeat the nephew, he hasn't gone anywhere. And so that Digvijay Pandit, he then goes to Jiva Goswami, and he challenges him, and he says, oh, you know, I've just defeated your gurus, you know, Rupa and Sanatan, and so what about you? And Jiva Goswami says, oh, really? You defeated my gurus? Yes, I defeated them. I even got their signature on this paper. Oh, really? You got their signature? Can I see that piece of paper? And so that scholar, he brings out this paper and hands it to Jiva Goswami. Jiva Goswami takes it and he rips it to pieces. And then Jiva Goswami challenges him, now you can debate with me, you know, and they have some type of conceptual argument, debate, and Jiva Goswami very easily defeats him. As I said, right, Bhaktivinoda Thakur described him as the greatest philosopher ever known to humankind, right? Nobody's going to beat him in argument and knowledge. And so Jiva Goswami defeats him, and then he chastises that man, and he, you know, the way our Gurudev expressed it, he said, you know, you came to an ocean of nectar and you couldn't even get one drop, you know, like you were able to meet with Rupa and Sanatana Goswami. Like what a rare opportunity in someone's life. And all you got out of it is some little prize for your ego. You know, you couldn't get anything. You couldn't get anything substantial, you know. But we hear that you know, Rupa Goswami, he heard about this, he was very unhappy, you know, and Rupa Goswami, he chastised Jiva Goswami and told him, you know, you cannot stay in Vrindavan, you know, with this type of mood, you know, you can only stay in Vrindavan if you are very humble. And he actually sent Jiva Goswami out and told him to go back to their hometown back in what was East Bengal at the time, now Bangladesh. Bakla Chandra Dweep, that was the name of the village that they were all from. And Jiva Goswami's heartbroken, and he goes and takes up residence on the banks of the Jamuna River, and thinking he'll just fast until the end of his life. And he had some work, some manuscript he was also working on at that time as well. So he's just sitting there on the bank of the Jamuna River, fasting and working on this writing and feeling very heartbroken. You know, his beloved guru threw him out. And then meanwhile, a day or a few days later, Sanatana Goswami came by. and he saw what was going on, and so he went to Rupa Goswami and he said, "Oh, Rupa, what are the three main teachings of Mahaprabhu?" And there's one expression, we don't exactly know the origin, or I haven't heard it, but it's some Bengali Vaishnava expression. Jive doya name ruchi Vaishnava seva. So these are the three main principles of Mahaprabhu's teachings. Jive doya mean doya is mercy. So to give mercy to all jivas, to all souls, to be merciful to all beings. Name ruchi means to taste the name, to chant the name, to serve the holy name of the Lord. And Vaishnava seva, to serve the Vaishnavas, to serve the devotees. So to be merciful to others, to chant the holy name, and to render service to the Vaishnavas. These are the three condensed teachings of Mahaprabhu. So Sanatan asked Rupa, so what are the main teachings of Mahaprabhu? Rupa Goswami just responded with that verse. But you see, there's this play on words, because in this expression, it says Jive doya, to be merciful to all jivas. Jiva means a living soul, but then it's also the name of Jiva Goswami, right? So there's this double meaning there. And so then when Rupa Goswami finished saying that expression, then Sanatan turned on him and said, "Oh, you just said to be merciful to all jivas, but there is one jiva sitting out, on the banks of the Jamuna. You have not been merciful to him. You have not given him any mercy." And so in this way, Sanatan, he, harmonized that situation. But you see, there's another similar story too, that was with Gopal Bhatta Goswami. Suvasini Didi knows that story, where Jiva Goswami took a stand, defending his guru Rupa Goswami. So you see, what is the spirit of Jiva Goswami, and you see, there are different expressions of humility, right? So Rupa and Sanatan, they had their own expression of humility. What is generally, the conventional way that we think of humility, right? They're just, bowing down and withdrawing from any conflict. That's one expression of humility. But Jiva Goswami's stance, that is nothing less. That is a different expression of humility, because he's taking that stand not for himself, but in service to his gurus. And so this is the spirit of Jiva Goswami. He's a protector, he's a fighter, and it's a unique role that he has and that he's honored with in our lineage. And I wanted to share today, let me do I'm going to do a screen share. Let me find it here. This is a beautiful verse. Some of you are familiar with, no doubt. This is part of a composition from that is made by Srila Sridhar Maharaj. This is published in the end of Prapana Jivanamrita. You also find it in some editions of our Kirtan Guide. This is actually the first Sanskrit composition that Srila Sridhar Maharaj wrote after he joined his guru's mission. I'm especially happy to share it today because it's glorifying Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and tomorrow is the appearance day of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And so we hear the background of this composition, right, that Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he's like a new member of this mission, and feeling so much love and regard for his guru, and thinking, how can I draw the grace of my guru upon me, myself? How can I please him? And so he understood, he came upon this very clever strategy that he thought, if I go directly to glorify my guru, I'll get some, limited appreciation for that. But if I glorify my guru's guru, who is most beloved to my guru, then I will draw maximum grace upon myself. And so he understood that Bhaktivinoda Thakur is everything to Saraswati Thakur. And so he thought, he took this roundabout route, right? Normally one would write something to glorify their guru, but he was very clever, right? So he wrote about Bhaktivinoda Thakur instead. And he was very successful. Saraswati Thakur was so pleased with this composition to the point where he said, you know, I'm satisfied that when I leave this world, one man remains behind who understands what I came to give. He made a comment like that. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj also expressed that he felt that this composition was a part of the basis of Saraswati Thakur requesting him to sing Shri Rupa Manjari Pada in his last days, in the last moments, last hours in this world. So this is the composition, but it's a prayer in separation from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, as the title tells us. And we won't go through it all right now. And it is also a little bit rasabas, because it's a separation, mood of separation, whereas tomorrow is actually the appearance day, not disappearance day. But it is an extraordinary composition, glorifying Bhaktivinoda Thakur. But then if we come to the 9th verse, now this is really very important verse for all Gaudiya Vaishnavas, I would say. It doesn't matter what mission, what organization they're a part of, but this should be a part of like the, what do you call it? Like the manual for every Gaudiya Vaishnava's, book. It's so valuable. It's really a very precious verse. And Gurudev actually mentioned about this verse, that there are a few verses that we could identify. They summarize everything, and this is one of them. There's this by Srila Sridhar Maharaj. There's Bhaktivinoda Thakur's, Amnaya Pravatatham, the summary verse, which is this, gives the whole structure for our book, Revealed Truth, right? Compiled from Srila Gurudev's talks. The whole book's been organized according to the structure of that verse of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. That also is summarizing, and then perhaps one other verse we can think of right now. Radyo Bhagavan Brajesha Tanayas. This is another verse also summarizing Mahaprabhu's conception. So this is also very, very valuable in that way. So what this verse is doing, it's really extraordinary. It's highlighting the real inner purpose of Mahaprabhu's descent into this world, which is ultimately to glorify Srimati Radharani. But then it's also very specifically identifying and placing the unique role that each of our acharyas since the time of Mahaprabhu have in their service to this gift of Mahaprabhu. Radha Dasyam, the service of Srimati Radharani. This is the ultimate gift of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then in this verse, Srila Sridhar Maharaj is describing the unique role that each of our acharyas have in distributing or protecting or serving that gift in different ways. So we can read this. Shri Gauranumatam Sarupa Viditam Rupa Grajainadritam Rupa Dhyai Pariveshitam Raguganer Aswaditam Sevitam Jiva Gyera Birakshitam Shuka Shiva Brahmadi Samanitam Shiradha Pada Sevanamritam Ahota Datam Ishobhavam. The internal purport is known to Sri Sarup Damodar by the sanction of Sri Gaurachandra, of that which is adored by Sri Sanatana Goswami and distributed by the preceptors realized in transcendental mellows headed by Rupa Goswami, that which is tasted and enhanced by Raghunath Das Goswami and followers, and carefully protected by the votaries headed by Sri Jiva Prabhu. So this line, Jiva Gyer Abhirakshitam, this is what we want to highlight today. This Rakshitam, you see, this is also the same word that's in Srila Sridhar Maharaj's name, right? Rakshak, Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar. It's referring to protection. And you hear that title of Srila Sridhar Maharaj that is used sometimes, guardian of devotion. This is also in Srila Sridhar Maharaj's nature, right? That's another discussion, to protect, to stand for the dignity of this line. So abhirakshitam, Jiva, Jiva dear abhirakshitam, what is protected, guarded by Jiva Goswami, that which from a respectful distance is venerated by great personalities, such as Sri Shuka, Lord Shiva, the chief of the demigods, and Lord Brahma, the grandfather of all beings. O wonder of wonders, the nectarian rapture of servitude unto Shri Radhika, that too you can give us. So this verse is ultimately glorifying Bhaktivinoda Thakur, right? This is like he's glorifying Bhaktivinoda in so many ways in the previous verses. Then in this verse, he's telling what is the greatest gift of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, that he can give this very rare and precious gift of the service of Srimati Radharani. Shri Radha Pada Sevanamritam, aho, this aho is like an exclamation, like, my goodness, oh my, this greatest of all great things, you can give this. So what is your position, Bhaktivinoda Thakur? And then it's tracing back in the previous lines the role that all these other great acharyas have had in handling and connecting and distributing this gift, right? What was known, because remember, right, in the time of Mahaprabhu, very, very few knew what his inner identity was of Krishna exploring the mood of Radharani. So who knew about that? Srup Damodar knew about that, and very few others. So Srup Damodar, Viditam, Srup Damodar, what was known to Srup Damodar, what Mahaprabhu came to give, that was known to Srup Damodar, which was adored by Sanatana Goswami, distributed, Rupadye Pariveshitam, this Pariveshitam is referring to distribution, was distributed by Rupa Goswami, Raghuganer Asvaditam, tasted, and Sevitam served by Raghunath Das and his group, those in his line. Jiva Dir Abhirakshitam, what was protected by Jiva Goswami, Shuka, Shiva, Brahmadi, Samani, what was Samanitam, respected, venerated. They cannot approach this great, high, wonderful thing. It is so great. Shuka, Shiva, Brahma, and so on, they are worshiping, venerating this from a respectful distance. And so it's very significant, right, that particularly the role of Jiva Goswami here is identified as that of protecting, right, this line. There's another verse also, which maybe quickly we can look at. It's in, let me go back here. It's a verse by Baladev Vidyabhushan, right? And some of you will know this important text, Govinda Bhashya, right, that Baladev wrote. That's a whole other story. When he was challenged by these scholars as to the position of Radha and Krishna. And this Baladev Vidyabhushan, this is going back like 300 years or so, 300, 400 years. Baladev had to write, like within a few days, he had to write this commentary in order to prove the validity of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's lineage. And he dedicated, there's one verse, it's, in the beginning of this commentary he wrote, he has a prayer to Jiva Goswami, right? Because he's writing this text for the sake of these scholars who are challenging their line. And so, who's the person who defeats all the anti-scholars? It's Jiva Goswami. So he has a special prayer glorifying Jiva Goswami. And our Gurudev, he talks about it in, there's one lecture. We are going over time. If any of you need to go, please feel free. Let me see. Protected journey. This is it. This is the verse. It's a very nice verse. He gives this analogy of like you're on a path trying to approach the beautiful form of Krishna, but the path is being, obstructed in so many different ways by different scholars and their different conceptions. And Jiva Goswami is the one who's clearing the way and allowing you to take this, smooth journey towards the lotus feet of Krishna. So this is the verse that Baladev wrote, Pranam Mantra to Jiva Goswami. Ya samkya pankena kutarka pamshuna vivarta gartena chalupta diritam shudam yadat vaksudaya maheshwaram krishnam sajiva prabhu rasta megati. I think there might be a typo in there. Something looks a little wrong. I offer I'm just going to read some parts. This is from our Gurudev's book. I offer my full dandavats unto the lotus feet of Srila Jiva Goswami, who is the protector of our spiritual life. He rescues us from the whole illusory environment. He protects us from Sankhya philosophy, which he compares to quicksand. Sankhya philosophy, Sankhya literally means something like counting, right? And there's emphasis on this like analysis of all the different elements. There is a theistic Sankhya, but there's also an atheistic Sankhya. So it's, there's a lot of this analysis involved, which he compares to quicksand. When the jivas want to cross over the ocean of material existence, they first come across muddy quicksand, right? Just sucks you in. You lose yourself. In the Nyaya, then there's Nyaya. Nyaya is referring to logic, argument. So that's another obstruction. In the Nyaya Shastra, so it's describing all these different types of scholars and scholarly approaches, which can take you away in different ways. The endless dry arguments are likened to ashes, soot, and smoke blowing in the wind and covering the eyes, sky, and everything around, so we cannot see what is really in our front. Through the wind of bad arguments, everything is covered and we cannot see Krishna. Next, he mentions Vivarta Gartena. Vivartavad is Shankaracharya's philosophy of Nirvisheshvad. So this is the conception of impersonalism, right? That God has no form, has no personality, has no qualities. It's all just a big oneness of nothingness, right? Which he compares to a hole in the road. You want to go to Krishna but cannot. Why? Because in the road there are these kinds of disturbances. The first disturbance comes from Sankhya philosophy compared to mud. Not only can you not cross it, but it is the kind of mud like quicksand from which you cannot extract yourself. You're just like stuck. The next disturbance is kutarka, which means Nyaya Shastra, argument, which is compared to the blowing of soot and smoke. Still you try to progress on your journey, but suddenly many large blind holes appear in the road. These holes are like Shankaracharya's Vivartavad. The Mayavad philosophy is waiting for you in the road like a hole. If you fall into that hole, you may be lost forever. And that hole, you lose your body. Nobody gives you any food or nourishment. Nothing is there and you die there. But Baladev Vidyabhushan says, Shuddham Vyadat Vaksudaya Maheshwaram. Jiva Goswami is the rescuer from that environment, and he has shown Sri Krishna in his exalted form. Jyotir Bhyantade Rupam Atulam Shama Sundaram. I offer my everything to him. This is a really beautiful line, by the way. It's a very cool line. It's somewhere in the scriptures. It's talking about the relationship between the Brahma Jyoti, right, the light surrounding Krishna, and then Krishna's personal form. Because normally persons get confused about this, like, is it a light? Is it a person? Is it just the light? And so this line harmonizes it so beautifully. It's saying beyond that light is the beautiful form of Krishna. But it's also quite charming the way it's saying, like, Jyoti, right, is light. So it's like this white light. So then Shama Sundar, this Shama is referring to black, right? So Shama Sundar means beautiful blackish form of the Lord. It's a name for Krishna. So it's like saying, beyond that white light is the beautiful black form of the Lord. Don't get stuck in this light. There's a person beyond that. I offer my everything to him. It is difficult for me to explain in English, but this is the line of thought. So very, very beautiful verse, isn't it? It's very nice how it's illustrating, all these different conceptions very visually. Okay, well, we stop there for today. So happy we can share all these wonderful topics. And I'd love to invite Suvasini Didi, if you'd like to share anything before we close for today. And welcome, I saw Somya, Sham, and Vijay. They've also joined us from the kitchen of Limerick Ashram. Dandavad. Great to see you. Suvasini, will you share any last words with us before we close for today?
Well, I don't have much to add, Didi. Wonderful, whatever you have shared, very wonderful. All I can say is, we are so indebted to all this, the teachers who have really, given so much, for, their contribution to us. And Jiva Goswami, who has protected all that. Otherwise, where we will be, is so much their contribution, living that life of austere life, but given so much to the future generations, for us. So we should be eternally indebted to all those great, wonderful teachers for us. They have given so much. That's all I should say. Nothing else.
Very beautiful, Didi. Yes, we're living on their prasad, isn't it? We're living on the grace that they've left us. And as you said, right, they face so many challenges and live lives of great austerity, but in the course of all that, giving so much energy for persons like ourselves, right, so that we can smoothly, progress in this line. Yes.
Yeah.
Jai.
Jai. Thank you, Didi. It's
Oh,
very beautiful.
so happy. It's so good to see your smiling face in the meeting. I think, oh, if Suvasini's happy, then it must be okay. And
You're
Ash's
always
head
wonderful.
nods. You've got the Indian head nod down, Ash. Pretty good. Well, anyone have any closing comments before we end for today? No. Really very, very happy to have all.
Thank you so much, Vishaka Didi, for reminding us that Jiva Goswami is our protector. Yeah, there's so much out there. It's just amazing. Yeah. I go to the temple, I can feel it. They all trying to catch you. Param Guru might say, ask Lord energy will come to catch you. They will claim on you. Yeah, Guru might say in one lecture. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ramananda Guru. Gurudev also mentioned once, Jiva Goswami is the protector of our, our sampradaya, and, we can pray to him if we're in trouble. He's the guardian of our whole lineage. Okay, we'll close there for today, and look forward to next week.